What if the voice inside your head, the one you have been listening to your entire life, is not on your side? Not sometimes. Not occasionally. Every single day. Think about that for a moment. Every decision you have made. Every time you talked yourself out of something. Every morning you woke up and told yourself you were not ready, not smart enough, not good enough, not the kind of person who gets to have the life they actually want. That was not wisdom. That was not caution. That was your own brain running a program designed to keep you exactly where you are. And here is the part that should disturb you deeply. You believed it. You are still believing it right now. The most dangerous lies are never the ones that come from other people. The most dangerous lies are the ones that come from inside you, because you never question them. You just call them thoughts. You call them reality. You call them who you are. This audiobook is about what happens when you finally stop believing the lie. By the time this audiobook ends, you will understand exactly how your brain has been constructing a false version of reality, and why that false version always conveniently keeps you small, safe, and stuck. You will know the specific mental patterns that have been running your life without your permission. You will understand why motivation fails, why self-doubt feels like logic, why your comfort zone feels like wisdom when it is actually a cage. And most importantly, you will have a completely different relationship with your own thoughts. Not because you became a different person, but because you finally understood the person you already are. This is not a feel-good audiobook. Nobody is going to tell you that you are perfect just the way you are. What we are going to do is far more useful than that. We are going to go inside the mechanics of the mind that has been running your life, and we are going to expose every lie it has been telling you, one by one, chapter by chapter, until there is nowhere left for those lies to hide. 10 chapters. Each one dismantling a different layer of the deception. Each one leaving you more awake than you were before you started listening. If you have ever felt like you were fighting against yourself, you were, and now you are about to find out why. Before we go any further, if this is the kind of content that makes you think differently, hit subscribe. Every week on this channel we go deep into the psychology of the mind, the science of behavior, and the thinking patterns that separate people who get what they want from people who wonder why they never did. You are already here. You are already listening. Stay with us. Chapter 1. The voice you never questioned. There is a voice that has been with you longer than any friend, any mentor, any teacher you have ever had. It was there before your first day of school. It was there the first time you tried something and failed. It was there every time you looked in the mirror, every time you sat in a room full of people wondering if you belonged, every time you came close to doing something great and then quietly, almost invisibly, pulled back. You have never questioned that voice. Why would you? It is yours. It sounds like you. It uses your memories, your experiences, your language. It references your past with perfect accuracy. It knows your fears better than anyone alive. And because it knows so much, because it feels so familiar, you have always assumed it was telling you the truth. That assumption is the most expensive mistake you have ever made. Here is what modern neuroscience has confirmed, and what most people will go their entire lives never understanding. The brain is not a truth machine. It is a survival machine. Its entire architecture, every neural pathway, every chemical signal, every cognitive shortcut, was designed for one purpose and one purpose only: keep you alive. Not happy. Not fulfilled. Not successful. Alive. Safe. Unchanged. And in the ancient world, that was exactly what you needed. When danger was physical, when a predator could end your life in seconds, a brain wired for caution and threat detection was a gift. The humans who survived were the ones whose brains screamed danger loudest and fastest. But you do not live in that world anymore. You live in a world where the threats are not physical. The threats are social, professional, emotional. The threat of rejection, the threat of failure, the threat of being seen and judged. And your brain, still running that ancient survival software, treats every single one of those threats as if your life depends on avoiding them. So when you think about starting the business, your brain fires the same alarm it would fire if you were standing at the edge of a cliff. When you think about speaking up in the meeting, your nervous system responds the same way it would respond if a predator was in the room. When you consider leaving the job that is slowly draining everything out of you, your brain does not weigh the pros and cons rationally. It runs one calculation. This is unknown. Unknown is dangerous. Stay. And you listen, because it sounds like wisdom, because it feels like caution, because the voice delivering that message is the same voice you have trusted your entire life. This is the first lie, and it is the foundation every other lie is built on. The lie is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not say, "I am lying to you right now." It shows up dressed as logic, dressed as practicality, dressed as maturity. The voice says things like, "Be realistic. You have responsibilities. Now is not the right time. Other people can do that, but you are different. You have tried before and it did not work." Every single one of those statements feels like wisdom. Every single one of those statements is a survival reflex dressed up in a suit. Consider the person who has wanted to leave their job for 3 years. They have the skills. They have the idea. They have the desire so strong it wakes them up at night. But every time they get close, every time the plan starts to feel real, the voice arrives. What if it fails? What about the mortgage? What if you are not as good as you think you are? And the plan goes back in the drawer. Another year passes. Then another. And somewhere in the back of their mind they start to believe that maybe the voice was right. Maybe they were never cut out for more. Maybe this is just who they are. That is not self-awareness. That is the lie becoming the identity. Here is what you need to understand about how this happens inside your brain. Every time you think a thought, especially a repeated thought, neurons fire together and wire together. That is not a metaphor. That is literal neurobiology. The more you think a thought, the more permanent the neural pathway becomes. The more permanent the pathway becomes, the more automatic the thought feels. And the more automatic it feels, the more it feels like truth rather than habit. This means that every time your brain told you that you were not ready and you believed it, that belief got stronger. Every time you accepted the story that you were not the kind of person who succeeds at big things, that story carved itself deeper into your neural architecture. You did not just think these things. You literally built them into the physical structure of your brain. That is the scale of what we are dealing with. This is not a mindset problem you can solve with a motivational quote. This is not something that gets fixed by a good week or a temporary burst of confidence. The lies your brain has been telling you are structurally embedded. They are part of the wiring. And rewiring takes something most people are never willing to give: sustained, deliberate, uncomfortable attention. But here is what changes everything. Here is the piece of information that reframes this entire conversation. The brain that built those pathways is the same brain that can rebuild them. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and rewire existing ones, does not stop at a certain age. It does not have a deadline. Research from institutions across the country has confirmed that the adult brain retains the ability to form new neural pathways throughout an entire lifetime. The cage was built by thought. It can be dismantled by thought. Different thought. Deliberate thought. Repeated with the same consistency that built the original lie. This is not wishful thinking. This is architecture. And architecture can be redesigned. But before you can redesign it, you have to do the one thing most people are never willing to do. You have to stop trusting the voice automatically. You have to create a gap, even a small one, between the thought and the belief, between what your brain says and what you accept as true. Because in that gap is where everything changes. In that gap is the difference between a person who is controlled by their mind and a person who controls it. The voice is not going to stop. It was never supposed to stop. The goal is not silence. The goal is not to eliminate fear or self-doubt or the instinct toward caution. The goal is to recognize those things for exactly what they are, old software running on hardware that was built for a different world, and to consciously choose whether to follow the signal or override it. Most people never learn to override it, not because they are weak, not because they lack willpower, but because nobody ever told them the voice was optional. Consider that for a moment. The voice that has been shaping every major decision of your life, every risk you did not take, every version of yourself you did not become, every door you walked past because the voice said you were not ready, was never a verdict. It was always a suggestion, and you had the power to decline it every single time. You were just never told that. That changes today, because the moment you understand that your brain is a pattern-following machine and not an oracle, the moment you stop treating every anxious thought as a prophecy and start treating it as a reflex, you step into a completely different relationship with your own potential. Not because the thoughts disappear, but because their power over you does. Chapter 1 ends here, but the work is just beginning. You now understand the foundation, the voice, the survival wiring, the neural pathways that built your current reality. But understanding the mechanism is only the first step, because there is a specific reason the lies feel so believable. A specific reason your brain does not just suggest limitation. It defends it. Aggressively. Intelligently. With evidence. In the next chapter, we go inside the system your brain uses to make its lies look like facts. It is called the confirmation bias loop. And once you see it working inside your own mind, you will never be able to unsee it. Chapter 2. The evidence your brain manufactures against you. Here is something that should stop you completely. Your brain is not just lying to you. It is building a case. Every single day, without your awareness, without your consent, your mind is collecting evidence, selectively, strategically, and with remarkable precision, to prove that everything it already believes about you is correct. It does not matter whether those beliefs are true. It does not matter whether they are serving you or destroying you. Your brain is not interested in accuracy. It is interested in consistency. And it will go to extraordinary lengths to make sure the story it has already decided about you remains intact. This is called confirmation bias. And it is not a personality flaw. It is not a sign of weakness or low intelligence. It is one of the most deeply embedded cognitive mechanisms in the entire human brain. Every person on this planet is running it. The difference between the people who transcend their limitations and the people who spend their lives confirming them is simply this. One group learned to see the mechanism. The other group never did. Let me show you exactly how it works inside your daily life. Imagine you have carried a belief for years, maybe since childhood, maybe since a failure that left a mark, that you are not the kind of person who finishes what they start. That belief feels true because you have evidence for it. The gym membership you stopped using, the course you never completed, the project that sat half-finished on your desk until you quietly archived it and pretended it never existed. The belief points to all of it and says, "See? This is who you are." But here is what your brain did not show you. It did not show you the hundreds of things you did finish, the relationships you maintained, the job you showed up to every day for years, the problems you solved that nobody else could solve, the quiet, unglamorous consistency that runs through your life in places you never think to look. Your brain filtered all of that out, not by accident, by design, because that evidence did not fit the story. And the brain's job, above everything else, is to keep the story consistent. This is confirmation bias in its rawest form. You believe something about yourself. Your brain goes looking for proof. It finds proof because it only looks in places where proof exists. It presents that proof to you as reality. You believe the thing more deeply. The belief becomes stronger. The filter becomes tighter. And the loop continues, feeding itself, growing more powerful, making the lie feel more like an undeniable fact with every single rotation. Now apply this to the biggest areas of your life. If you believe you are not good with money, your brain will make sure you notice every financial mistake you make and filter out every smart decision. If you believe relationships never work out for you, your brain will highlight every conflict and minimize every moment of genuine connection. If you believe you are not the kind of person who gets ahead professionally, your brain will spotlight every time someone else was chosen over you and quietly erase every moment you performed brilliantly. You are not seeing reality. You are seeing a heavily edited version of reality that your brain curated specifically to confirm what it already decided was true. And the truly unsettling part, the part that separates the people who understand this from the people who do not, is that the evidence feels completely real. It feels objective. When you point to your failures and say, "This is why I cannot," you are not being dramatic or self-pitying. You are being logical. The evidence is right there. You can see it. You can name it. You can trace it back through years of your life. But you are only seeing half the picture, the half your brain decided you should see. There is a study that has been replicated across dozens of research institutions that demonstrates this with startling clarity. When people are shown information that contradicts a deeply held belief, the part of the brain responsible for critical thinking does not activate more strongly. It activates less. The brain does not lean in and examine the contradicting evidence carefully. It dismisses it. Faster and more aggressively the stronger the original belief is. In other words, the more convinced you are of something about yourself, the harder your brain works to protect that conviction from anything that might challenge it. Your brain is not just collecting evidence against you. It is actively defending the verdict. Think about what this means for the version of yourself you have been trying to become. Every time you tried to believe you were capable of more, your brain went to work immediately dismantling that belief. Every time someone told you that you were talented or that you had potential, some part of you deflected it, minimized it, found a reason it did not count. Not because you were broken, because your brain was doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting the consistency of the existing story. This is why affirmations alone do not work. This is why being told you are capable does not automatically make you feel capable. You cannot override a deeply embedded neural narrative by simply introducing a contradicting thought. The brain does not work that way. The existing belief has years of confirmed evidence behind it. One positive statement cannot compete with that kind of structural reinforcement. So what does work? The answer is not what most people expect. The way to break the confirmation bias loop is not to fight the evidence your brain has collected. Fighting it gives it power. The way to break it is to start deliberately expanding the field of evidence your brain is allowed to consider. This means training yourself, consciously, repeatedly, with intention, to notice what your brain is filtering out. Every day, in the areas where you carry the heaviest limiting beliefs, you force yourself to look for contradicting evidence. Not to dismiss the negative evidence. Not to pretend failure did not happen, but to insist on a complete picture rather than a curated one. When your brain says you never finish anything, you write down 3 things you finished this week. Small things count. Medium things count. Everything counts. You are not building false confidence. You are correcting a corrupted data set. When your brain says you are not good enough to be in the room, you recall one specific moment when your contribution mattered. One moment when your presence changed something. You hold that moment with the same weight your brain has been giving to the moments of doubt. You demand equal representation in your own mind. This sounds simple. It is not easy, because the brain resists this process with everything it has. It will tell you that the positive evidence does not count, that you are being delusional, that you are just trying to feel better rather than see clearly. And you have to recognize that resistance for exactly what it is, the confirmation bias loop fighting to stay alive. The lie defending itself because its survival depends on your continued belief. Here is the practical framework that makes this work in real life. At the end of every day, not once a week, not when you remember, every single day, ask yourself 3 questions. What did I do today that contradicted my worst belief about myself? What did I filter out today that deserved my attention? What evidence existed today that my brain chose not to show me? These questions do not feel powerful in the moment. They feel small, almost administrative. But what they are doing beneath the surface is extraordinary. They are forcing new neural pathways to form. They are training your brain to look in different directions. They are slowly, systematically dismantling the confirmation bias loop by refusing to let it operate without challenge. Over weeks, this changes the filter. Over months, it changes the story. Over a year of consistent practice, it changes the person. The American entrepreneur and investor Naval Ravikant once said something that cuts directly to the heart of this, that the hardest thing to do is to see yourself clearly. Not harshly, not generously, clearly, without the distortion of a brain that has already decided who you are and is working full-time to prove itself right. Seeing yourself clearly is an act of discipline. It requires the same daily commitment as physical training. And just like physical training, the results are not visible after one session. They are visible after months of showing up and doing the work even when the brain insists the work is pointless. You are not your confirmation bias. You are not the curated evidence your brain has spent years collecting against you. You are the full picture, the complete, unfiltered, unedited version of a human being whose potential has never once been accurately measured by the voice inside their own head. The loop can be broken. The filter can be reset. The story can be rewritten, not with wishful thinking, not with blind optimism, but with a disciplined daily practice of demanding that your brain show you everything. Not just the evidence it prefers. All of it. That is how the lie loses its grip. Not dramatically, not all at once, but one honest observation at a time, every day, until the brain that was working against you is finally, for the first time in your life, working with you. You have now seen 2 layers of the deception. The survival wiring that makes the lies feel like wisdom, and the confirmation bias loop that makes the lies feel like facts. But there is a 3rd layer, and this one lives deeper than thought. It lives in the body, in the nervous system, in the physical sensations your brain uses to make its narratives feel not just believable but undeniable. In the next chapter, we go into the body, because the most convincing lies your brain tells you are not the ones you think. They are the ones you feel. Chapter 3. When the lie lives in your body. You have probably never thought of your body as a liar. You have thought of it as honest, raw, unfiltered. When your heart races, that means something is wrong. When your stomach tightens before a big moment, that means danger is real. When your chest constricts and your breathing shortens and every muscle in your body sends the same signal simultaneously, that means stop, pull back. This is not safe. Your body feels like the most truthful thing about you. More honest than your thoughts, which you can argue with. More honest than other people's opinions, which you can dismiss. The body speaks in sensations, and sensations feel like facts. This is the deepest layer of the deception, and it is the one almost nobody talks about. Because here is what is actually happening inside your nervous system every time your body delivers one of those powerful physical signals. Your brain, the same brain that has been running its survival software, the same brain that has been curating confirmation bias evidence against you, is also directly controlling your physical experience. It is generating those sensations deliberately, strategically, as the final, most convincing piece of evidence for the story it has already decided is true. When you feel fear in your body before a high-stakes conversation, your brain did not detect a threat and then generate fear. It generated fear first, based on pattern recognition, based on past experience, based on the stored narrative about who you are and what happens to people like you, and then sent that fear signal into your body so that the physical sensation would confirm the mental story. The sensation arrives and you think, my body knows. My gut is telling me something. This must be real. Your body is not telling you something. Your brain is using your body to tell you something. There is a profound difference between those two things. And understanding that difference is one of the most liberating realizations available to a human being. Consider the last time you were about to do something that mattered. A presentation, a difficult conversation, a moment that required you to step forward when everything in you wanted to step back. Your hands may have trembled slightly. Your voice may have felt unreliable. Your heart rate elevated. Your palms produced moisture. And your brain looked at all of that physical evidence and delivered its verdict. You are not ready for this. Your own body is telling you so. But here is the extraordinary truth that changes everything about that moment. Every single physical symptom you just experienced, the elevated heart rate, the heightened alertness, the surging energy through your limbs, is physiologically identical to excitement. Not similar. Identical. The same neurochemicals. The same hormonal cascade. The same measurable physical state. The only difference between the experience of crippling fear and the experience of electric excitement is the story your brain wrapped around the sensation. Harvard psychologist Amy Cuddy and her research team demonstrated this through studies that revealed something remarkable about the relationship between the body and the brain's narrative. The physical state does not just respond to the story, it reinforces it. Which means the moment you accept the brain's interpretation of a physical sensation as fear rather than excitement, your body doubles down on producing fear-consistent signals. The story and the sensation enter a feedback loop, each one making the other more intense, each one making the lie feel more undeniably, physically real. This is why people with severe anxiety will tell you that they know, intellectually, rationally, that they are not in danger. They understand the logic. They can articulate clearly that the situation does not warrant the response their body is producing. And yet the sensation continues. Because the sensation is not responding to logic. It is responding to the story. And the story is running at a level far deeper than conscious thought. Now think about how this has operated throughout your life. Every time you had a physical reaction to a challenging situation and interpreted that reaction as confirmation of your limitations. Every time your nervous system fired and your brain said, "See, even your body knows you cannot handle this," you were not receiving honest physical feedback. You were experiencing the final act of a con that started in your neural architecture and ended in your nervous system. A con so sophisticated, so seamlessly integrated into your physical experience, that questioning it felt not just difficult but genuinely irrational. The body felt it. How could the body be wrong? The body was not wrong. The interpretation was wrong. And the interpretation was manufactured by the same system that has been running every other layer of this deception. So what do you do with this? Because understanding that your brain manipulates your physical sensations is one thing. Standing in the middle of a boardroom with your heart hammering and your hands shaking and reinterpreting that experience in real time is something else entirely. That requires a specific practice skill, and it is a skill that can be built. The first tool is what researchers call cognitive reappraisal. It is the deliberate practice of catching the moment between sensation and interpretation and inserting a different story before the brain's default narrative takes hold. When the physical signal arrives, when the heart rate elevates, when the stomach tightens, when the body fires its alarm, instead of accepting the brain's automatic label of fear or danger, you consciously ask a different question. Not, "Why am I afraid?" That question accepts the fear label and sends you looking for evidence to justify it. Instead you ask, "What is my body preparing me for?" That single question reframes the entire physical experience. It shifts the sensation from a warning signal to a preparation signal, from evidence of inadequacy to evidence of readiness. Your body is not telling you that you cannot handle what is coming. Your body is mobilizing every resource it has to make sure you perform at your highest level. The elevated heart rate is pumping more oxygen to your brain. The heightened alertness is sharpening your perception. The energy surging through your limbs is your nervous system clearing the runway for peak performance. Your body was always on your side. Your brain just kept mistranslating the message. The second tool is somatic grounding, and this one works at the physical level rather than the cognitive one. When the nervous system fires into high alert, the fastest way to interrupt the feedback loop between sensation and story is to give the body a competing physical input. Slow, deliberate breathing, specifically a longer exhale than inhale, directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system responsible for calm, clarity, and considered action. A 4-count inhale followed by a 6 or 8-count exhale does not just feel calming. It physiologically overrides the stress response by shifting the autonomic nervous system out of fight or flight mode. This is not relaxation. This is a biological override. You are literally using your breath to interrupt the circuit between your brain's story and your body's response. And in that interruption, in that brief physiological reset, you create space. The same kind of space we talked about in Chapter 1. The gap between the signal and the belief. The place where conscious choice becomes possible. The third tool is arguably the most powerful and the most counterintuitive. Instead of trying to calm the physical sensation, you move toward it. You deliberately increase your physical presence in the moment. You stand taller, you breathe deeper, you take up more space rather than contracting into less. Research consistently shows that expansive physical posture produces measurable changes in hormone levels within minutes, specifically increases in testosterone, which is associated with confidence and decisive action, and decreases in cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone driving the fear response. Your posture is not just a reflection of how you feel. It is an active input into how you feel. The body and the brain are in constant conversation. Most people only know how to let the brain talk and the body listen. The people who operate at the highest levels, the ones who perform under pressure when everyone else contracts, have learned to let the body talk back. To use physical state as a tool rather than receiving it passively as a verdict. Think about every high-pressure moment you have ever retreated from. Every opportunity you let pass because the physical sensation in your body felt like a confirmation that you were not ready. Every version of yourself you did not step into because your nervous system fired and your brain said, your own body is telling you no. Now understand that what you were experiencing was not your body's honest assessment of your capabilities. It was your brain's oldest and most convincing trick, translating a story into a sensation and presenting that sensation as biological truth, making the lie so physical, so immediate, so viscerally real that questioning it felt like arguing with your own heartbeat. You were never arguing with your heartbeat. You were arguing with a narrative. And narratives, no matter how physically convincing they become, can be rewritten. The brain lies in thought. It reinforces those lies with selective evidence. And when thought and evidence are not enough, it reaches into the body and makes the lie something you can physically feel. That is the full architecture of the deception you have been living inside. But now you can see all 3 layers. And a lie you can see clearly has already lost most of its power over you. There is one more layer to uncover, and this one does not live inside you at all. It lives between you and every other person in your life. Because the most insidious thing the brain does with its lies is not keep them private. It projects them outward. It shapes how you see other people, how you interpret their behavior, and how you unconsciously arrange your entire social world to confirm the story it has already decided about who you are and what you deserve. In the next chapter, we go outside the mind and into the relationships, the rooms, and the social dynamics that your brain has been quietly engineering to keep the lie alive. Chapter 4. The world your brain built around you. There is something happening in your social life that you have never been told about. Every relationship you are in, every room you walk into, every person you keep close and every person you keep at a distance, every dynamic you tolerate and every opportunity you pursue or quietly abandon. None of it is random. None of it is coincidence. None of it is simply the result of circumstances lining up or failing to line up in your favor. Your brain built it, all of it, deliberately, systematically, with the same precision it used to construct the internal lies and the same commitment it used to manufacture the physical sensations that made those lies feel undeniable. The external world you inhabit is not something that happened to you. It is something your brain constructed around you to make sure the story it has been telling about you never gets seriously challenged. This is the part of the deception that reaches the farthest. And it is the part that is the hardest to see, because it does not feel like something happening inside you. It feels like something happening out there, in the world, in other people, in circumstances beyond your control. That feeling of helplessness is the final masterpiece of the lying brain. Here is the mechanism. Human beings are, at the most fundamental level, pattern-matching social creatures. The brain is constantly scanning the social environment for signals. Signals of acceptance, rejection, status, threat, belonging, and danger. And just like it does with internal thought and physical sensation, it interprets every one of those signals through the lens of the story it has already decided is true about you. If the story says you are not someone who deserves to be at the table, your brain will find evidence of that in every room you enter. It will notice the person who did not acknowledge you and filter out the 3 people who did. It will remember the meeting where your idea was passed over and forget the meeting where your contribution shifted the entire direction of the conversation. It will interpret neutral facial expressions as disapproval, silence as rejection, and busyness as dismissal, because all of those interpretations are consistent with the narrative. And consistency, as we now know, is what the brain is always protecting. But the social deception goes even deeper than misinterpretation, because the brain does not just distort your perception of the social world. It actively shapes your behavior within it in ways that cause the social world to respond to you in ways that confirm the lie. Consider what psychologists call the self-fulfilling prophecy, and not as a vague motivational concept but as a precise behavioral mechanism. If you believe you are not someone people take seriously, your brain will subtly, often invisibly, adjust your behavior in social situations to reflect that belief. Your voice will drop slightly in volume and certainty. Your posture will shift toward contraction rather than expansion. Your eye contact will become intermittent rather than steady. You will qualify your statements with phrases like, "I might be wrong but," or "this is probably a stupid idea," before you even finish the thought. You will laugh slightly too quickly at other people's observations and pause slightly too long before asserting your own. None of this is conscious. None of this is deliberate. You are not choosing to undermine yourself in these moments. Your brain is doing it automatically, adjusting your social presentation to match the internal story, so that the people around you receive a version of you that is smaller, less certain, and less commanding than you actually are. And then those people respond to the smaller version. They interrupt more. They direct their attention elsewhere more readily. They assign leadership to other people in the room. And your brain looks at all of that social feedback and says, "There it is. There is the proof. This is how people respond to you. This is your place." The lie went out into the world, shaped your behavior, shaped other people's responses, came back as social evidence, and reinforced the original story. The loop is now external as well as internal. The deception has colonized your relationships, your professional environment, your social standing, and it did it using your own behavior as the instrument. Think about the people you have chosen to keep closest in your life. Not casually, deeply. The people you call when something matters. The people whose opinions carry real weight for you. Now ask yourself honestly, do those people consistently reflect your highest potential back at you? Do they challenge you to become more than you currently are? Do they speak to the version of you that is still emerging, still growing, still capable of things you have not yet attempted? Or do they reflect the story? Do they validate the limitations? Do they laugh knowingly when you talk about the bigger life you want? Not with cruelty, but with the comfortable familiarity of people who share the same ceiling? Do they make you feel understood in the smallness rather than challenged toward the largeness? The brain selects for social environments that confirm its narrative. It is drawn toward people who share the same limitations because those relationships feel safe, familiar, and validating. Not because those people are bad for you, but because proximity to people who have already exceeded the limitations your brain insists are fixed is genuinely threatening to the survival of the story. And the brain will do everything in its power to keep you away from that threat. This is why every person who has ever made a significant transformation in their life will tell you, without exception, that the transformation required a change in their social environment. Not always a dramatic one. Not always a painful severing of old relationships, but always a deliberate expansion toward people who operated at a different level. People whose existence was living proof that the ceiling the brain insisted was real was actually optional. The proximity principle is one of the most empirically supported phenomena in behavioral psychology. You do not just absorb the habits and attitudes of the people around you gradually and unconsciously. You literally adopt their neurological patterns. Mirror neurons, the brain cells responsible for social learning and empathy, fire in response to the behavior of people in your immediate environment. You are not just influenced by the people you spend time with. You are neurologically shaped by them. Your brain builds itself partly in the image of the minds it is most frequently around. This means the social world your brain constructed to confirm its lies is also the social world that is physically reinforcing those lies at the neurological level. Every hour spent in an environment that reflects limitation is an hour spent deepening the neural pathways that make limitation feel permanent. And every hour spent in an environment that reflects possibility is an hour spent building new pathways toward a version of yourself your brain has not yet learned to believe in. This is not about abandoning the people you love. This is not about becoming cold or transactional in your relationships. This is about understanding that your social environment is not neutral. It is an active force shaping your neurology, your behavior, your self-perception, and ultimately your outcomes. And once you understand that, you cannot continue to treat your social world as something that simply happened to you. You have to start treating it as something you are responsible for curating. The practical application of this is both simpler and more demanding than most people expect. It starts with an honest audit. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not the people you like most or care about most, but the people who occupy the most hours of your actual lived experience. Then ask a single unflinching question about each one. Does this person's presence in my life pull me toward the version of myself I am trying to become, or does it anchor me to the version my brain has already decided I am? That question is not an instruction to cut people off. It is an instruction to become conscious, to stop sleepwalking through a social world that your lying brain carefully arranged to keep the story intact, to start making deliberate choices about who gets your time, your energy, your attention. Because those choices are not just social preferences. They are neurological investments. The second practical step is deliberate exposure. Seek out one environment, one room, one community, one online space, one professional context, where the people operating inside it have already achieved something your brain currently insists is beyond you. Not to compare yourself, not to feel inadequate, but to allow your mirror neurons to do what they were designed to do. To let your brain begin building pathways toward a reality it can now see being lived rather than one it can only abstractly imagine. The brain believes what it repeatedly witnesses. Give it something different to witness. The third step is perhaps the most uncomfortable of all, and it involves the way you speak about yourself in social situations. Every time you diminish yourself publicly, every time you preemptively apologize for your opinions, every time you frame your achievements as luck and your failures as character, you are not just being modest. You are issuing a social instruction to everyone around you about how to treat you. And people, being the pattern-following social creatures that they are, will follow that instruction with remarkable accuracy. Speak about yourself the way you would speak about someone you deeply respect. Not with arrogance. Not with performance, with the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who has decided that their presence, their perspective, and their potential deserve to be taken seriously. That shift alone will change how every room you walk into responds to you, because you will have changed the social signal you are broadcasting. The world your brain built around you was always a reflection of the story inside you, which means as the story changes, as the lies lose their structural power, the world around you will begin to change with it. Not as magic, not as wishful thinking, but as the inevitable social consequence of a person who finally stopped letting their brain arrange their entire external reality around a lie. You have now seen all 4 layers of the architecture: the internal voice, the manufactured evidence, the physical sensation, the social world constructed to confirm it all. But there is a question that has been building beneath the surface of every chapter so far, and it is the most important question in this entire audiobook. Why does the brain fight so hard to keep the lie alive? What is it actually protecting? Because the survival instinct alone does not fully explain the ferocity of the resistance. There is something deeper driving it, something more personal, something that goes to the very core of human psychology. In the next chapter, the midpoint of this audiobook and the place where everything changes, we go directly to the heart of it. Chapter 5. The real reason your brain won't let you win. Every chapter so far has shown you a different layer of the lie. The voice, the manufactured evidence, the physical sensation, the social world built around the story. But underneath all of it, beneath every mechanism, every loop, every layer of the deception, there is a single driving force that makes the brain fight this hard to keep you exactly where you are. It is not fear. It is not laziness. It is not weakness of character. It is identity. Your brain is not lying to you because it wants you to fail. It is lying to you because it believes, at the deepest possible level of its programming, that the limitations it has been defending are not obstacles between you and your real self. They are your real self. The brain does not experience your limitations as a cage. It experiences them as you, and threatening the cage feels exactly like threatening the person inside it. This is the insight that changes everything. This is the one that most people never reach. Here is what is actually happening. From the earliest years of your life, your brain began constructing what psychologists call a self-concept, a consolidated story of who you are, what you are capable of, what kind of person you are in the world. This self-concept was built from experience, from feedback, from the words of parents and teachers and peers, from every success and failure and moment of comparison that left a mark. By the time you reached adulthood, that self-concept was not just a collection of beliefs. It had become the operating system your brain runs everything through. And here is the critical thing about an operating system. It does not evaluate whether it is the best possible system. It simply runs. It protects itself from being overwritten. It treats any input that contradicts its core programming not as useful new information but as a threat to system integrity. When you try to become more than your self-concept allows, when you attempt to earn more, achieve more, demand more from yourself and the world than the operating system has defined as appropriate for someone like you, your brain does not cheer you on. It pulls the emergency brake, not because the goal is impossible, because the goal is inconsistent with the identity, and identity preservation is a more powerful drive than goal achievement in almost every human being alive. This is why people win the lottery and lose it all within 3 years. The external reality changed, but the internal operating system did not. The self-concept said, "I am not someone who has this kind of money," and the brain went to work, through decisions, relationships, spending patterns, and self-sabotage so subtle it looked like bad luck, until the external reality matched the internal story again. This is why people lose significant weight and gain it back. The body changed, but the identity did not. Deep in the operating system, the story still said, "I am someone who struggles with this." And the brain navigated every subsequent choice through that lens until the story became physically true again. This is why you have probably had periods in your life where everything was going right, where you were performing well, feeling good, moving forward, and then something happened. A decision that seemed inexplicable in hindsight. A relationship that got sabotaged. An opportunity that somehow slipped away. You may have blamed circumstances. You may have blamed other people. But the truth is that your brain hit the ceiling of what your self-concept allowed and did what it always does when that ceiling gets approached. It brought you back down to the story. This phenomenon has a name in psychology. It is called an upper limit problem, a term developed by psychologist Gay Hendricks after decades of clinical research into why high-functioning people consistently self-sabotage at the threshold of their own expansion. The brain has a thermostat setting for success, for happiness, for abundance. And when life rises above that setting, the brain generates the exact circumstances necessary to bring the temperature back down to where the identity says it belongs. Understanding this does not just explain your past. It completely reframes your future. Because if the root of every limitation is identity rather than capability, then the work is not about acquiring new skills or strategies or information. The work is about changing the operating system, updating the self-concept, deciding deliberately, repeatedly, with a full force of conscious intention, that the story the brain has been running is not a fixed truth about who you are. It is an outdated file. And outdated files can be replaced. The way you replace them is not by fighting the old identity. Fighting it gives it energy. The way you replace it is by building a new one alongside it, through action, through evidence, through the daily practice of behaving like the person you are becoming before you feel like that person. Before the brain catches up. Before the self-concept updates. You act first. The identity follows the behavior. Not the other way around. Every time you do the thing the old identity said was not for you, every time you take the risk, have the conversation, claim the space, attempt the goal, you are not just taking an action. You are casting a vote for a new self-concept. And votes accumulate, one at a time, day after day, until the new story has enough evidence behind it that the brain stops treating it as a threat and starts treating it as the truth. The brain that has been lying to you your entire life was always protecting an identity. Now you are building a better one. The old operating system does not get deleted overnight, but it does get replaced. One deliberate action, one conscious choice, one identity vote at a time. In the next chapter, we talk about the moment the old system fights back hardest. Because it will. And knowing exactly when and how that happens is the difference between people who change and people who almost changed. Chapter 6. When the old system fights back. You need to be warned about something. The moment you decide to change. The moment you make a genuine, committed decision to stop believing the lie and start building the new identity, something will happen that nobody prepares you for. The resistance will intensify. The self-doubt will get louder. The sabotaging thoughts will arrive with more frequency, more urgency, and more convincing logic than they have ever had before. And if you do not know that this is coming, you will interpret that intensification as evidence that you were wrong to try. You will hear the volume of the resistance and conclude that the resistance must be right. You will mistake the brain fighting back for the universe pushing back. And you will stop, not because you failed, but because nobody told you that the fight getting harder is actually the first sign that you are winning. This is the chapter that keeps people in the game when everything in them is screaming to quit. Here is what is happening neurologically when the old system fights back. 4 years, possibly decades, your brain has been running the same neural pathways, the same thought patterns, the same behavioral loops, the same identity-confirming routines. Those pathways are not just habits. They are deeply myelinated neural highways, thick, fast, efficient, and extraordinarily resistant to replacement. When you start building new pathways through new behavior and new thought, the old pathways do not quietly step aside. They fire harder. They produce stronger signals. They generate more compelling arguments for why the old way was correct and the new direction is dangerous. Neuroscientists call this an extinction burst. When a deeply conditioned behavior pattern is no longer being reinforced, when you stop feeding the old loop, the brain produces a final, intense surge of the old pattern before it begins to fade. Like a fire that flares brightest just before it goes out. The extinction burst is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of biological transition. It is the old system using every resource it has left for one final attempt to pull you back before the new pathways become strong enough to take over. Every person who has ever successfully rewired a deeply embedded pattern has passed through this moment. The moment where everything feels harder than it did before they started. Where the doubt is louder, the fear is stronger, and the pull back toward the familiar is almost physically overwhelming. Most people hit this moment and conclude that change is not possible for them specifically. That other people can do it, but they are different. That the resistance they are feeling is proof of a fundamental limitation rather than evidence of a neurological transition already underway. That conclusion is the last lie. And it is the most dangerous one because it arrives at exactly the moment when everything is actually about to shift. Think about every significant attempt at change you have made in your life. Think about how far you got before it collapsed. For most people, the collapse happens not at the beginning, when motivation is fresh and the decision feels clean, but right at the edge of the breakthrough. Right at the point where the new behavior was becoming natural and the old identity was genuinely losing its grip. The brain fired its extinction burst. The resistance peaked. And without knowing what that meant, you stepped back. You were not weak. You were uninformed. And that ends right now. The practical framework for surviving the extinction burst has 3 components, and all 3 need to be in place before the resistance arrives, because trying to build the framework while you are inside the burst is like trying to build a shelter in the middle of a storm. The first component is anticipation. You decide in advance, before the resistance comes, that the intensification of doubt and fear is not a signal to stop. It is a scheduled event. It is a biological certainty that will arrive at some point during every genuine attempt at change. When it arrives, you do not evaluate it. You do not negotiate with it. You simply recognize it by name. This is the extinction burst. This is the old system making its last stand. And you continue. The second component is compression. When the resistance is at its peak, you compress your focus from the full scope of the change you are attempting down to the smallest possible next action. Not the whole new identity, not the complete transformation, just the next one thing, the next conversation, the next decision, the next hour. The brain cannot sustain an extinction burst indefinitely. It is an energy-intensive process. If you can keep moving through small, concrete actions while the burst is firing, the burst will exhaust itself. And on the other side of it is a neurological landscape that is permanently different from the one you started in. The third component is the environment. During the period of peak resistance, your environment needs to be working for you rather than against you. This means deliberately reducing access to the patterns, people, and places that feed the old identity. Not permanently, but during the window of transition when the old pathways are fighting hardest for survival. Remove the friction from the new behavior. Add friction to the old one. Make the path of the new identity slightly easier and the path of the old identity slightly harder, and let the brain's natural tendency toward efficiency do the rest. These 3 components will not make the extinction burst painless. Nothing makes it painless, but they make it survivable. And survivable is all you need, because the burst always ends. The old system always exhausts itself eventually, and every person who has stayed in motion through that exhaustion has arrived on the other side of it as someone their old self would not fully recognize. The fight getting harder is not a reason to stop. It is the most reliable sign available to you that you are finally, genuinely, close. In the next chapter, we talk about what happens after the burst, because the transition is only half the work. What you build in the silence after the resistance fades will determine everything about how permanent the change actually becomes. Chapter 7. Building what the lie almost destroyed. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a major internal battle. Not the silence of peace. Not yet. The silence of exhaustion. The quiet that arrives when the resistance has finally burned through its fuel and the old system has nothing left to throw at you. You are still standing. The burst has passed. And now you are facing something that nobody warned you about on the other side of the fight. You are facing a version of yourself you do not yet recognize. This is the moment most people mishandle. Because they survived the resistance, which took everything they had, and now they expect to feel transformed. They expect clarity and certainty and the unmistakable sensation of having arrived somewhere new. Instead, they feel disoriented, unmoored, like someone who just won a war and has no idea what to do with the peace. And because that disorientation does not feel like success, they conclude that something went wrong, that the change did not take, that they are back to square one. They are not back to square one. They are standing at the foundation of something new. They just do not know how to build on it yet. Here is what is actually happening in this phase. Your old neural pathways, the ones that carried the lie, the ones that built the confirmation bias loop, the ones that manufactured the physical sensations and arranged the social world around the story, have lost their structural dominance. They have not disappeared. Neural pathways do not simply vanish, but they have been weakened significantly by the consistent pressure of new behavior applied through the extinction burst and out the other side. They are no longer the highway. They have been reduced to a side road. But the new pathways, the ones you have been building through deliberate action and conscious identity work, are not yet fully myelinated. They are not yet thick and fast and automatic the way the old ones were. They are real. They are functional. But they require conscious effort to access. They require intention to activate. And in the exhausted silence after the fight, that effort can feel enormous. This phase has a name in behavioral psychology. It is called the integration window, and it is one of the most important and most neglected concepts in the entire science of human change. The integration window is the period immediately following a significant neurological transition, the weeks and months after the extinction burst has passed, during which the new patterns are most vulnerable to collapse and most responsive to reinforcement. What you do in this window does not just maintain the change. It determines how deep and how permanent the change becomes. Think of it this way. You have cleared the land. The old structures have been dismantled. The soil is fresh and ready. But cleared land does not stay clear on its own. Without deliberate planting, the old growth comes back. Not with the same ferocity as before. It has been significantly weakened, but steadily, quietly, opportunistically. The brain, seeking efficiency, will always default back toward whatever pathways cost the least energy to run. And if the new pathways are not being reinforced consistently during the integration window, the old ones will begin reclaiming territory by default. This is why people who make genuine breakthroughs sometimes find themselves sliding backward 6 months later without any obvious triggering event. The breakthrough was real. The change was real. But the integration window was left unattended. The new ground was not cultivated. And the brain, being the efficiency-seeking survival machine it has always been, quietly returned to what it knew. The 3 pillars of successful integration are identity anchoring, behavioral consistency, and environmental permanence. Together they transform a temporary breakthrough into a structural change that the brain eventually accepts not as an achievement but as the new normal. Identity anchoring means giving the new version of yourself a concrete, specific definition that the brain can begin organizing around. Not a vague aspiration. Not, I want to be more confident, or I want to think bigger. A precise identity statement that describes a person rather than a goal. Something like, I am someone who acts before I feel ready. Or, I am someone whose first instinct is possibility rather than limitation. The brain needs something specific to build toward. Vague aspirations produce vague neural architecture. Specific identity statements give the brain a blueprint. Behavioral consistency means showing up for the new identity every single day during the integration window. Not heroically, not dramatically, but reliably. Small actions performed consistently are neurologically more powerful than large actions performed occasionally. Every day that you behave in alignment with the new identity, You are adding another layer of myelin to the new neural pathways. Every day that you skip, even for understandable reasons, you are allowing the old pathways to reclaim a small amount of their former efficiency. Consistency is not a motivational concept. It is a biological requirement. Environmental permanence means making the changes to your physical and social environment that you made during the extinction burst not temporary adjustments but permanent features of your daily life. The people you moved closer to during the transition, stay close to them. The friction you added to the old patterns, keep it there. The friction you removed from the new ones, maintain that removal. Your environment should be continuously engineered to make the new identity the path of least resistance rather than the path of most effort. These three pillars work together as a system. Identity anchoring tells the brain who it is becoming. Behavioral consistency builds the neural infrastructure of that identity. Environmental permanence removes the obstacles that would slow the construction down. Applied together, consistently, through the integration window and beyond, they do not just consolidate the change. They make the new identity so structurally embedded that the old one begins to feel genuinely foreign. The lie almost destroyed the person you were always capable of being. Not through dramatic assault, through patient, invisible, daily erosion. The antidote to patient invisible erosion is patient invisible construction. Building the new identity the same way the old one was built. One repeated experience at a time, except this time with your eyes open and your intention fully engaged. You are not rebuilding what the lie destroyed. You are building something the lie never allowed to exist in the first place. In the next chapter, we talk about the world that opens up when the new identity becomes stable. Because the external changes that follow an internal transformation are not random. They are predictable. They are specific. And they are far more significant than most people dare to expect. Chapter 8. The external world responds. Something shifts in the world around you when you change on the inside. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Not in the way motivational content promises, where you wake up one morning radiating a new energy and the universe instantly rearranges itself in your favor. It happens more quietly than that. More precisely, more mechanically, because what changes around you is not the result of cosmic forces aligning with your new mindset. It is the result of something far more concrete and far more powerful than that. Your behavior changed, and behavior produces outcomes. Always, without exception, with the reliability of mathematics. When the internal operating system updates, when the self-concept shifts, when the identity anchors into new territory, when the brain stops manufacturing lies at the same volume and frequency it once did, the behavior that emerges from that updated system is fundamentally different from the behavior that came before. Different behavior produces different responses from the people around you. Different responses reshape the opportunities available to you. Different opportunities, pursued with the confidence of someone who is no longer running on a corrupted internal narrative, produce different results. And different results feed back into the new identity, strengthening it further, accelerating the transformation in ways that begin to feel, from the outside, almost miraculous. It is not miraculous. It is mechanical. And understanding the mechanics gives you control over the acceleration. The first external shift that people consistently report after genuine internal transformation is a change in how other people treat them. And specifically, a change that seems to arrive without any direct conversation or announcement. They did not tell their colleagues they had changed. They did not post about their transformation on social media. They simply showed up differently, with steadier eye contact, with opinions delivered without the preemptive apology, with the quiet, grounded energy of someone who no longer needs the room's approval to feel legitimate. And the room responded. Not because the room is generous or perceptive or particularly attuned to personal growth, but because human beings are extraordinarily sensitive social creatures who read behavioral signals at a level far below conscious awareness. The social signal you broadcast determines the social response you receive. You changed the signal. The response changed automatically. Consider what this means for every professional relationship, every personal dynamic, every room you have been walking into for years carrying the weight of an identity that told you to make yourself smaller. The people in those rooms were never responding to you. They were responding to the version of you that your lying brain was projecting outward. The version that qualified its opinions, that contracted under pressure, that interpreted neutral expressions as disapproval and filled silence with unnecessary explanation. That version is being replaced. And as it is replaced, gradually, consistently, without announcement, the social world around you begins to reorganize itself around the new signal. Opportunities that were always present but invisible to the old identity become suddenly, almost startlingly visible. This is not because the opportunities did not exist before. It is because the old operating system was not scanning for them. The confirmation bias filter that spent years collecting evidence of limitation was simultaneously filtering out evidence of possibility. As that filter loosens, as the new identity begins organizing the brain's attention around expansion rather than protection, you start noticing doors that were always open but that your brain had categorized as not for you and therefore invisible. This is one of the most disorienting and exhilarating experiences available to a human being. The sudden recognition that the landscape of your life contains far more possibility than you were ever equipped to see while the lie was running. That the opportunities were not absent. Your perception of them was. And perception, as we now understand deeply, is not a passive receiver of reality. It is an active constructor of it, shaped entirely by the story the brain has decided is true. The second major external shift is in the quality of your decision-making under pressure. When the old identity was running, high-stakes decisions were filtered through the survival system, through fear, through confirmation bias, through the physical sensations that made caution feel like wisdom. The result was a consistent pattern of choosing the familiar over the optimal, the safe over the expansive, the known over the possible, every single time. So reliably that the pattern became invisible, just the way things are, just who you are, just how decisions get made. With the new identity stabilizing, decisions that would previously have triggered the full survival response now pass through a different filter. Not a fearless one. Fear does not disappear, nor should it, but a filter that recognizes fear as information rather than instruction. That can hold the discomfort of uncertainty without immediately defaulting to retreat. That can evaluate a high-stakes opportunity not just through the lens of what could go wrong but through the equally weighted lens of what becomes possible if it goes right. This shift in decision-making quality compounds over time in ways that are genuinely difficult to overstate. Every major outcome in a human life is the downstream result of a series of decisions. Change the quality of the decisions and you change the trajectory of the outcomes. Not randomly, not occasionally, but systematically and permanently. The third external shift is perhaps the subtlest and the most profound. It is a change in your relationship with time. People running on a corrupted internal narrative experience time as something that is happening to them, a current they are being carried by, a resource that is draining away while they remain stuck in the same patterns, the same limitations, the same version of themselves that the lie insisted was fixed and final. Time felt like an opponent. With the new identity in place, time becomes a collaborator. Every day is not just another day of surviving the story, it is another day of building evidence for the new one. Another day of behavioral consistency adding myelin to the new neural pathways. Another day of the external world reorganizing around the updated signal you are broadcasting. Progress becomes visible not just in dramatic outcomes but in the quiet daily accumulation of a person becoming more fully themselves. The world was always going to respond to whoever you decided to be. The lie just made sure you decided to be someone small. That decision has been revoked, and the world is already beginning to notice. In the next chapter, we confront the final obstacle, the one that appears not at the beginning of the journey and not during the resistance, but right at the threshold of the life you have been building toward. The one that stops more people at the finish line than at the starting line. Chapter 9. The finish line that moves. There is a cruel and specific kind of trap that waits for people who have done the real work. Not the people who quit early. Not the people who never started. The people who went through every layer of the deception, survived the extinction burst, built the new identity, watched the external world begin to reorganize around their transformation, and then, right at the threshold of the life they had been building toward, stopped, pulled back, found a reason, always a convincing, rational, beautifully logical reason, why now was not quite the right moment, why they needed just a little more preparation, why the goal, upon closer inspection, needed to be slightly adjusted, slightly reduced, slightly safer. This trap has a name. It is called the threshold problem, and it is the final, most sophisticated maneuver of the lying brain, the one it saves specifically for the moment when everything the old identity feared is about to become real. Because here is what nobody tells you about reaching the threshold of genuine transformation. It does not feel like triumph. It feels like exposure. The closer you get to the life your old identity insisted was not for you, the more vulnerable the new identity feels. The stakes feel higher precisely because the possibility is more real. When the goal was safely distant, failure was abstract. When the goal is right in front of you, when it is no longer a dream but an imminent reality, the fear of losing it becomes almost unbearable. And the brain, true to its oldest programming, interprets that unbearable feeling as a signal to retreat. So the finish line moves. Not because the goal changed, because the brain moved it. Because arriving at the destination means fully inhabiting the new identity, and fully inhabiting the new identity means the old one is genuinely, permanently gone. And even a corrupted, limiting, suffocating identity feels safer than the terror of its complete dissolution. This is why talented people perpetually almost make it. This is why brilliant people spend decades hovering at the edge of their own breakthrough without ever stepping through it. This is why the person with every skill, every resource, every external condition required for success finds themselves, inexplicably, repeatedly, maddeningly, one step short of the moment that would change everything. They are not unlucky. They are not undeserving. They are running the brain's final protection protocol, and they do not know it. Understanding the threshold problem reframes every near miss in your history. Every time you got close and then something happened. Every time the opportunity materialized and then dissolved. Every time you were right at the edge of a breakthrough and then found yourself inexplicably back where you started. That was not fate. That was not a sign from the universe that you were not ready. That was your brain executing its most sophisticated defensive move at the exact moment the old identity felt most threatened. Knowing this is the first weapon against it. Because the threshold problem derives almost all of its power from invisibility. It works because it does not announce itself as fear. It announces itself as wisdom, as maturity, as careful, responsible thinking. It says things like, the timing is not quite right. You should build a stronger foundation first. There is one more thing you need to learn before you are truly ready. And because these statements sound so reasonable, because they feel so different from the obvious self-sabotage of earlier stages, they are almost impossible to challenge without the specific knowledge of what they actually are. They are the finish line moving, and the finish line will keep moving for as long as you allow the brain to move it. The practical response to the threshold problem is built on 3 recognitions that must become instinctive, so deeply understood that the brain cannot deploy its final maneuver without you immediately identifying it for what it is. The first recognition is this: readiness is a lie the brain tells at the threshold. There is no version of any significant goal where you will feel fully ready at the moment of commitment. Readiness is a sensation the brain promises but never delivers, because delivering it would mean removing the final barrier to the very change it is trying to prevent. The people who achieve transformative things do not feel ready. They feel terrified and they move anyway. Readiness is not a prerequisite for action. It is a reward that action eventually produces. The second recognition is that the quality of your reasons to wait is directly proportional to how close you are to something real. When the excuses are vague and emotional, you are probably still in the early stages of resistance. When the excuses become highly specific, deeply logical, and almost impossible to argue with, that is the signal that you are at the threshold. The sophistication of the resistance is a map. The more convincing the reason to pause, the more urgently you need to move forward. The third recognition is perhaps the most important of all. The cost of waiting at the threshold is not neutral. Every day spent hovering at the edge of the life you have been building toward is not a day of careful preparation. It is a day of active retreat. The new neural pathways that you built through months of consistent work require forward motion to stay strong. Stagnation at the threshold does not preserve the progress you made. It slowly erodes it. The brain interprets prolonged inaction as a signal that the new identity was not serious, and it begins, quietly and efficiently, reclaiming the territory it lost. You do not get to stand at the finish line indefinitely. You either cross it or you drift back from it. There is no stable middle ground. This means the response to recognizing the threshold problem is not patience. It is not additional preparation. It is not one more round of refinement before committing. The response is immediate, imperfect, committed forward motion. Not because you feel ready, not because the conditions are perfect, but because you now understand that the brain's final lie, the one that sounds most like wisdom, the one that wears the most convincing disguise, is the lie that the moment to move has not quite arrived yet. The moment has arrived. It arrived the second you understood what was keeping you from it. There is one chapter left, and it does not summarize what you have learned. It does something far more important than that. It shows you exactly who you become when the lying stops, and what that person is capable of doing with the one life they actually have. Chapter 10. The person the lie was hiding. Everything in this audiobook has been building to this moment, not to a summary, not to a recap of everything you have learned across 9 chapters of dismantling the most sophisticated deception a human being can experience. You do not need a summary. You lived every word of this. You recognized yourself in it. You felt the discomfort of seeing clearly what has been operating beneath the surface of your life, quietly, persistently, with devastating effectiveness, for longer than you care to count. What this final chapter is about is something more important than summary. It is about the person who has been waiting on the other side of every lie your brain ever told you. The person who existed before the survival wiring convinced you to play small. Before the confirmation bias loop collected its corrupted evidence. Before the physical sensations made the lies feel biological. Before the social world arranged itself around a story that was never true. Before the old identity dug its roots so deep that challenging it felt like challenging your own existence. That person did not disappear. They were never destroyed. They were hidden, buried under years of accumulated deception so patient and so precise that you eventually stopped looking for them. You accepted the version the lie produced and called it who you are. It was never who you are. Here is what becomes available to a human being when the lying stops. Not partially, not temporarily, but structurally, at the level of neural architecture and identity and the daily lived experience of moving through the world. What becomes available is not a perfect life. Not a life without fear or failure or the inevitable friction of being a conscious person in a complicated world. What becomes available is something far more valuable than perfection. What becomes available is accuracy. For the first time, possibly for the first time in your adult life, you begin to see yourself and your circumstances with something approaching genuine clarity. Not through the distorting lens of a brain-running survival software on a world that stopped requiring it. Not through the curated filter of confirmation bias collecting only the evidence that confirms the worst story about you. Not through the physical sensation of fear being mistranslated as incapacity. Through clear, unmediated, honest perception of what is actually true about who you are and what you are actually capable of. And what is actually true is almost certainly far more than the lie ever allowed you to believe. Think about the most capable, most grounded, most quietly powerful people you have ever encountered. the ones who walk into rooms and change the energy without effort, the ones who speak and are listened to, not because they are the loudest but because every word they say carries the unmistakable weight of someone who means it, the ones who face setbacks without collapsing, who pursue goals without constantly seeking permission, who occupy their lives with the full presence of someone who has decided, completely and without apology, that they belong exactly where they are. You have probably looked at those people and felt the familiar distance, the sense that they possess something you do not, some quality, some confidence, some fundamental characteristic that was distributed to them and withheld from you. The lie loved that feeling. It fed on it. It used it as some of its most compelling evidence. But now you know what that quality actually is. It is not a gift. It is not a personality type. It is not the result of an easier life or better circumstances or some fortunate combination of genetics and opportunity. It is the result of a brain that is no longer working against the person it inhabits. A self-concept that has been updated to reflect capability rather than limitation. An identity that has been built deliberately, through the exact same process you have been learning across every chapter of this audiobook, rather than assembled accidentally from the wreckage of unchallenged lies. Those people are not different from you in kind. They are different from you in practice. And practice is something you now know how to do. The American poet Mary Oliver asked what is arguably the most important question a human being can sit with. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Not as a rhetorical flourish, as a genuine, urgent, deeply personal demand for an answer. Because life is real. The wildness of it is real. The preciousness of it, the absolute non-renewable, non-refundable, unrepeatable nature of every single day of it, is the most concrete fact available to any human being. And the lie has been spending it, quietly, efficiently, one convincing limitation at a time. Every day you believed the voice was a day the real version of you did not get to exist fully. Every time you pulled back from the threshold, it was a moment of your actual life redirected into the service of a fiction. Every confirmation bias loop, every physical sensation mistranslated as incapacity, every social world arranged around a story that was never true, all of it was paid for with the currency of your irreplaceable time. That payment stops now. Not tomorrow. Not when the conditions feel more favorable. Not when you have done one more round of preparation or gathered one more piece of evidence that you are ready. Now. In this moment. With the understanding you carry out of this audiobook as the only credential you have ever actually needed. Because the credential was never a degree or a title or an achievement or someone else's validation. The credential was always self-knowledge. The deep, unflinching, structurally embedded understanding of how your mind works, how it deceives, how it protects, how it resists, and most importantly, how it transforms when you finally stop letting it run on autopilot and start directing it with intention. You have that understanding now. It cannot be taken from you. It lives in the new neural pathways you have already begun building simply by engaging with these ideas honestly. It lives in the moments of recognition you felt across every chapter, the moments where you heard your own life being described and something in you shifted, even slightly, even quietly, in the direction of truth. The person the lie was hiding has always been you, fully capable, fully worthy, fully equipped for the life that the lying brain spent years insisting was meant for someone else. It was always meant for you. The only thing that was ever standing between you and that life was a story. And now you know, with a kind of knowledge that does not fade, does not require motivation to maintain, does not collapse under the pressure of a hard day or a loud moment of self-doubt, that stories can be rewritten. Go rewrite yours.